The question of whether someone's past sexual history affects their ability to succeed in long-term relationships is one of the most debated issues in modern dating culture. Many people assume the answer should be simple, yet emotions, personal values, and social narratives make it controversial. At its core, the discussion isn't about judgment. It's about patterns of behavior, psychology, and long-term compatibility. People bring their habits, preferences, and emotional frameworks into relationships, whether they realize it or not. Understanding how past experiences influence future choices can help individuals make more intentional decisions when it comes to commitment, trust, and long-term partnership. When researchers look at long-term relationship success, they often focus on outcomes like marital satisfaction, divorce rates, emotional stability, and infidelity. Across multiple studies, people with a higher number of casual sexual partners tend, on average, to experience higher rates of dissatisfaction and infidelity. This doesn't mean everyone with a higher body count will struggle, but it does show a consistent statistical trend. These numbers reflect tendencies, not destinies. The bigger question becomes why this pattern exists and what it reveals about human behavior. One explanation is rooted in habit formation. Human behavior is shaped by repetition. When someone becomes accustomed to short-term relationships or casual encounters, their brain adapts to novelty, excitement, and low emotional investment. Over time, this can make long-term emotional bonding more difficult. Long-term relationships demand patience, compromise, loyalty, and delayed gratification. If someone has spent years prioritizing instant gratification and easy exits, the transition into lifelong commitment can feel restrictive, even if they deeply care about their partner. Infidelity is often at the center of this discussion because cheating resembles casual sex in its emotional structure, secrecy, novelty, and detachment. Statistics repeatedly show that individuals with more premarital partners report higher rates of extramarital affairs later in life. Again, this is not a moral judgment, but a behavioral observation. People tend to repeat familiar patterns. Someone who has repeatedly separated sex from emotional commitment may find it easier to cross boundaries when relationship challenges arise. Another layer of the issue involves sociosexuality, a personality trait that reflects how comfortable someone is with uncommitted sexual relationships. Some people naturally lean toward long-term bonding, while others are more oriented towards sexual variety. Body count often acts as a rough surface-level indicator of this deeper personality trait. The number alone doesn't tell the full story, but it can hint at how someone views sex, emotional attachment, and exclusivity. Critics of this perspective often argue that people can get it out of their system before settling down. The idea is that early exploration reduces future temptation. However, this logic doesn't consistently hold up in behavioral science. We don't usually weaken habits by practicing them more. Whether it's substance use, screen addiction, or casual dating, repetition often strengthens neural pathways rather than closing them. Desire typically grows through reinforcement, not exhaustion. At the same time, it's important to recognize that not all experiences with casual sex reinforce unhealthy patterns. Some individuals have short-term encounters, feel unsatisfied, and decide they want something deeper. For them, the experience clarifies rather than confuses their values. This highlights a crucial truth. People interpret and process experiences differently. What strengthens one person's desire for variety may strengthen another person's commitment to monogamy. Another factor complicating the debate is relationship dissatisfaction. Many researchers argue that dissatisfaction is one of the biggest predictors of cheating. But dissatisfaction itself often emerges from deeper traits like impulsivity, novelty-seeking, emotional detachment, or poor conflict management. In this sense, dissatisfaction can act as a gatekeeper rather than a root cause. When emotional investment drops, all other temptations become more powerful. It's also essential to distinguish between correlation and causation. Just because two things move together doesn't mean one directly causes the other. People who struggle with commitment may both accumulate more partners and experience more failed long-term relationships for the same underlying reasons. Without controlled experiments, which are ethically impossible in this context, we cannot definitively prove cause and effect. Age and timing also dramatically change how we interpret numbers. Sleeping with 5 people at 35 is very different from sleeping with 5 people at 18. Context matters. A sequence of long-term relationships reflects stability and relational experience, while repeated one-night encounters reflect very different motivations and habits. Numbers without narrative provide an incomplete and often misleading picture. Recency also plays a major role. Someone who explored casually many years ago and has since maintained one long-term relationship likely reflects a shift in values. In contrast, someone with the same number accumulated recently may be actively reinforcing short-term patterns. Human behavior is dynamic, and who someone is today matters more than who they were a decade ago. Cultural messaging further complicates everything. Media often glamorizes casual sex while downplaying its emotional consequences. Movies depict one-night encounters as exciting, romantic, and transformational, rarely showing the awkward silence, emotional confusion, or regret that often follows. These distorted signals shape expectations, especially among younger audiences, making long-term commitment seem dull by comparison. There is also the genetic and biological dimension. Just as people differ in metabolism or risk tolerance, they also differ in sex drive, impulse control, and need for novelty. Some individuals are biologically wired to seek more stimulation and variety. This doesn't make them broken. It simply means their default settings may not naturally align with strict monogamy without intentional effort. What gets lost in most public debates is individual compatibility. Two people with similar sexual histories, values, and expectations may form an extremely stable bond regardless of their numbers. Problems tend to emerge when there is a sharp mismatch. One partner seeking novelty, the other seeking lifelong exclusivity. Alignment matters far more than raw statistics. For people considering their future, the most practical takeaway is not fear, but self-awareness. If someone desires lifelong monogamy, it's wise to reflect on whether their current habits support that goal. Habits shape character. Patterns shape outcomes. Aligning daily behavior with long-term vision increases the probability of relational success. That same awareness should extend to partner selection. Instead of obsessing over numbers alone, people benefit more from understanding how their partner views commitment, conflict, loyalty, and boundaries. Someone with a higher past count but strong present values and stability may be far more reliable than someone with a lower count but unresolved emotional instability. Regret also plays a psychological role. Some people who heavily prioritize casual relationships later struggle with comparison, emotional numbness, or unrealistic expectations. When intimacy becomes routine and interchangeable, emotional bonding can weaken. This doesn't ruin someone permanently, but it can require conscious effort to rebuild depth and attachment. From a developmental perspective, early adulthood is a powerful period for shaping relationship norms. The patterns built in these years often echo forward for decades. This doesn't mean people are locked into permanent outcomes, but change becomes harder when behaviors are deeply ingrained. Growth is always possible, yet intentional discipline becomes essential. Ultimately, body count is not destiny, but neither is it meaningless. It acts as a signal, a data point, and sometimes a warning, but never the full story. The future of any relationship depends far more on communication, emotional intelligence, value alignment, and mutual effort than on a single number. Understanding the patterns allows people to make better decisions without falling into shame, fear, or simplistic judgment. The real question isn't how many people someone has been with. The real question is who they are becoming. Are their habits moving them towards stability or chaos, depth or distraction, commitment or constant reset? When behavior aligns with values, long-term relationships thrive. When it doesn't, conflict and instability tend to follow, regardless of the past.